We're here in Rabbi Orlowek's home, a tremendous chus. Thank you, Rabbi, for having us. Here for the Akshiva broadcast. In addition, does not need my introductions to being a master educator and a Marbitz Torah, Torah teacher, but also an expert in Jewish education. And to talk about the enormous topic of bullying, it's a big, big privilege to be here. Rabbi, thank you very, very much for having us.
Welcome.
Before we start, is there anything the Rav would like to say as a way of an introduction?
I just want to say a few words. Rabbi Shaul Salanta said, not everything that you think should you say. Not everything that you say should you write. Not everything that you write should you print. Gam asoi sforim ein kates. There are a lot of books. And if there's a mistake in a book, I tell people, when you see the second or third revised edition of a parenting book, like one that was about letting your kid cry it out, and the person has admitted that he was wrong, so then you got a problem. The second revised edition. So who got the first edition? So I spent a lot of time thinking about this. It's a subject that's very close to me. The first time I did this was in 1973 at a convention. And since then, there's been a lot of pain over this subject. I have notes, and it's purposely so. Because when something's really important, thought through, wording is important. And even though I do expect to be misunderstood anyway, or misquoted, but let's try and minimize that, okay? In addition, what I'm saying, I believe to be true, I know to be true, I've experienced with many people to be true. But it doesn't mean that a person can take this interview and then just go off and do. Every person needs to have a mentor, a Rav, a principal. Even principals need mentors, right? This, in my opinion, is the function of conventions, that people can come and talk to each other. And I am making my suggestions. They're not guesses. But when it comes to education, people are different. And we have to look at them as being different. But there's still klolim. Like the Derech Hashem says, we can't go through all the pratim, there are too many. But there are some klolim that are true. And this is the reason I'm going to be referring to notes. And I will be mentioning one or two names. It's not that I'm telling you to go talk to these people necessarily, even though I know them as being people who would be able to help, but they know they can deal with this question. And there has to be go-to people who have time to sit and listen and understand before saying, do this. Okay? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi. So we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about schools, mechanchim, parents, other people involved in the bullying picture, and maybe a few things from the Rav's experience personally. So on the topic of schools, would the Rav agree that schools need to be proactive in addressing bullying and negative social situations, or is it just something that happens in the social sphere and it's not really the responsibility of schools?
In the good old days, before they had schools, if schools are a good idea, Moshe Rabbeinu would have made one. Would have made one. Schools today, since the time of the Tanoim, they've been necessary to help Klal Yisrael. The latest takana, I think perhaps the most recent takana in the history of the Jewish people, which was meant to help us succeed in this boat that's being constantly buffeted called Gullus, and we're in Gullus everywhere. So Chazal had to make protective things to keep us alive. I believe the last takana that saved Klal Yisrael was Beis Yaakov. If not for Sarah Shnira, so like where would we be? Where would we be? Maybe there are a few Soloveitchiks around and a few Blois around. They'll be around the Mishpachas Milchas Yisrael. There are some. But Klal Yisrael, like where would we be? So the schools on some level have taken on the role of parenting also. And a great part of the child's day and life is spent in school. So there's responsibility, okay? The child's social life, his academic life, above all, his self-esteem. Self-esteem is probably the most problematic thing that we have today. I went on a walk with Rabbi, Zechariah Levracha, and he spoke about low self-esteem. That we can't ask children to do a cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting of the soul, in the old way of what did I do wrong today? No. Today, what did I do right? It's different today. Rav Naftali Kaplan, Shlita, told me the same thing. And he said, one of the reasons is technology. It's because I just press a button, I get my answer. Or I want to do something, all the selections are there. The world is open for me. I don't need you. This is a great threat to us. Schools today are locus parentis. They're instead of parents. And therefore they have achrayus. Rav Zechariah said, the thing you had to look for most in a Rabbi or anyone else who's in education or any job is, does he have achrayus? Does he take responsibility? It comes to an achris. How is it going to look at the end? Okay, so schools are very much part of this. We're going to talk about how we relate to a school and relate to a principal, because there's a word that's often not, we don't do well enough, is beforehand. You know, we go to a dentist when we need a root canal. We go to a social worker or a principal, mostly to complain. Yeah? Okay. And then we expect something to happen, like what was going on until now. Yeah? The people who really know this are fundraisers. You establish a relationship with someone. You go to his happy times and less than happy times. You're not trying to raise money for him then, but you're a friend. How do you look at a school? How do you look at a principal? So in that framework, so I would like to say, yes, the schools have achrayus, but parents, the buck stops by the parent. And that's who we're talking to. On some level, I hope that principals would be willing to see this, but I don't view this as a talk to principals, okay? Principals are overwhelmed by many things. And yes, it should be clarified that bullying is one of the most serious things I've seen in the last 40 years, what it does to children. And I've seen it, and I followed up, okay? What it does to their self-esteem and their self-image. And children who are bullied become bullies. That's what they've learned, and that's how they've learned to act. And I recently learned from a very, very special parent that then they do other things also. Besides verbal and viral and physical abuse in the physical sense, but there's also other types of abuse, which doctors and social workers, at least in Israel, are obligated to report without having to say what it is. And they do that, and there's a connection between them. Because one abuse leads to the other. But we have to understand from the get-go, from the beginning, that the bully is in trouble also. He needs our help. He's a person. He has low self-esteem. He needs to feel good about himself by putting someone else down and by hurting someone else. That gives him his good feeling. I feel so sorry for him. But it's more than that. When he becomes a bully and it serves his self-esteem or his sense of power or whatever it might be, his future marriage, his future parenting, with the law, the police differentiate between someone who's 17 and 364 days old and someone 17 and 365 days old. He's not a minor anymore. People don't change on a dime. He's in trouble. And this has been documented. It's been documented that they stand a higher chance of divorce, of failed parenting, and trouble with the law. This is a reality. It's not an opinion. He needs our help. And we have to love him and care for him and build up his self-image. So I don't want to separate this into the victim and the perpetrator. It's very important because how you look at someone is going to be a prelude to how you treat him, especially non-verbally. So that needs to be right away. The schools are locus parentis. The child's personality, for better or worse, is formed in school. First grade and preschool are such important grades. I'm sorry, it may not be considered as high social standing. But a very great Jew told me that 100 years ago, 80 years ago in Morocco, they put the teachers in the front row in Mizrach. They got recognition, okay? So they are the ones who are putting into that person that sense of who they are. And that has to do both the bullied, what we're going to talk about, and the bullier. There are three people who are involved in a bullying situation. One is the one who's doing the bullying, the one who's getting bullied, okay, and the bystanders. And on some level, it's the bystanders who are more culpable, who are more guilty, because they allow it to happen. Because the bully cannot do what he does if he's going to be disapproval. The Chavetz Chaim talks about if we can get people to look down on people who speak Lashon Hara and do certain things, well, they'll stop doing it. Okay? He says it clearly. So that means a school, from the get-go, from the beginning, has to have a social network where we love each other. We're friends. We care about each other. Now, I don't know Kabbalah. I'm not up to there yet. Okay? I'm old enough to study Kabbalah, but I'm not up to there yet. But in your Sidurim, it says you should be makabel on yourself, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your friend as yourself. Where did that come from? It came from the Arizal. And he said, why is a shul called the Beit HaKnesset? It's where we all come together. A minyan is a group. We have to be together, And there are many examples of this. But if we're not together, so our tefillas don't have that same power of going up together. So the Arizal says, you must be makabel in yourself, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. But you're not a knesses. You're not a gathering. Okay? And that's a very powerful statement in us, in Nigla, in open Torah. Yeah? So if children are taught at the beginning of their school lives We're together. We love each other. We're in the same school. You know, it's an interesting vignette. I usually don't prepare the stories. Interesting vignette that Rav Miller, Rabbi Victor Miller, okay? So he did a lot to help some people in Europe by the consul general in Kovna went to the same high school he did in Baltimore. And he made sure to schmooze about baseball and what the classes were like, and you have this program, oh, did you have that teacher? And there was a camaraderie. He was able to do a lot of things for people who needed help for the American consul, who was not always so helpful, yeah? Because they had a camaraderie, went to the same school. Or, you know, during the war in Gaza, the previous one, I found out yesterday that there was a war. Yeah? So I was coming from Tel Aviv, and you heard the sirens. So my taxi driver, who's been driving me for 10 years, because he actually looks at the road, okay? Which, you know, is so important. So I said, get out and spread eagle yourself on the road. Ahead of us was another woman who was spread eagled on the road. She was not from Mea Shearim. We're together. Israel is a country which is splintered, yeah? Except in foreign airports. We all get together. Because we're focusing what brings us together, okay? In Israel, there are enough Jews to go around. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not politics. We're talking to the subject, okay? So when a class and a school, they feel together. You know, my mashgiach, Zechet Tzadik Levocha, Reb Hirsch Feldman in the Mir in Brooklyn, he had a tradition from Rabbi Rucham Levovitz, who was arguably one of the greatest Mechanchim of the 20th century. I could tell you stories about him, but we don't have time now. He told them that you want to reward a child, so he has to give out whatever it is, treats or something, you know, to everyone else. Part of his reward is that the other guy gets. And I tell principals, if there's a siyum, if there's a class that finished, whatever they finished, it's a great happiness. And let all the children join in it. Let's feel together. Let's take care of each other. Yeah? So that's why this is so important. And there are no bystanders who say, oh, we can't do anything. No, we can't do that. We were taught not to do that. And you can teach first graders. Okay? You can teach kindergarten kids. Now, there's a Jew named Rabbi Yitzchak Grossbart. He was for many years in Detroit, in Yeshiva's Beis Yehuda. Now he became the principal in Yeshiva Spring Valley. Wonderful educator. He had a program, and one of the reasons I have notes is because I want to read to you what he did to develop a sense of camaraderie in his school. Yeah? Okay, so he said there are 8 basic steps. Tell stories about the trait that you want to encourage. Now, the traits that he did with was Avos Yisrael, loving Jews, yeah? Consideration for others, listening to others, listening. Disagreeing with others, how to disagree. Seeing the good points in the other people, yeah? Gratitude, patience, dealing with insults, compassion, chesed through action, chesed through word, simcha. These were his subjects. You have in the school posters, the classroom is decorated, and the kids see this all the time. It's called subliminal advertising, which is illegal, you know, in the outside world, but that's fine. Yeah? In Beis Yehuda in Detroit, those halls are lined with pictures of Gedolim, of great men. The message gets through subliminally. There's no, you know, you can't resist it. That's why it's illegal. Except, you know, we say, you know, the ends justify the means, I guess. So he said, stories, personal examples from your life, sources from Chazal, examples in your life. And he even had in the older grades exercises. So a school can do that. There's a Jew named Rabbi Kramer. The last time I saw him was at a convention, BC, before Corona, yeah, in 2020 in Amsterdam. And we spoke about it because he's an expert on that. He told me, if someone says to the kid, "You're stupid," and you should say, "And you're intelligent." So what's he going to do now? "You're ugly," and you're handsome. But that's just like a point. We're not going here into, but he's a person who can help you, and you should access him. Now, I'm not going to give out telephone numbers, okay? But if you contacted Torah Masorah, well, I'm just going to contradict myself. I'm going to give you Torah Masorah's telephone number. 212-227-1000. There's a Jew named Rav David Bernstein. Rav David Bernstein is the head of HDOS, teacher training. This man is in love with helping Klal Yisrael. Okay? He's in love with helping Klal Yisrael. There's another difficulty that parents need to understand. A bullying incident can take 20 seconds. So, like, go catch the guy. It's true, teachers need to be to patrol, and there should be cameras. But it's not just on protecting the victim, which we must. Elokim yivakesh hanirdof. Hashem spells special love for the one who's being pursued. And the Medrash says, even if the pursuer is a tzaddik and the one who's being pursued is a rasha, Elokim yivakesh es hanirdof, he still has a certain allegiance to the one who's being chased. Of course. But understand, it's very hard. Also, calling in parents of the bully, I have never seen it be productive. They deny, they blame, they're defensive, they feel like they're being attacked because they are. I've seen friendships broken up because, well, we're close, I'll just call you. No, but they're saying of it, no. And this is very difficult. So parents need to understand that there's not a simple thing. Now, there was a great principal, Zacharin Levach, who said, it's not such a problem bullying, it'll toughen the kid up. No, he's wrong. He was a wonderful Jew. But that's what he held about bullying. And there were difficulties. Okay? So it's important to, before we're going to talk about parents, before you even talk to a principal, first of all, make yourself known to him. Who are you? Are you a complainer? How often do you write supportive and appreciative letters? Or just come in to say thank you? I was an elementary school teacher for 12 years in Yiddish. And 1 year I was principal, which of course I got out of it as soon as I could. It's hard. It's really hard. Yeah? And it's a difficult job. I know which parents, as a Rebbe, they give a tablespoon of nachas, appreciation, or they write a note. And I used to write notes to them. Friday morning, the last 15 minutes was mayhem. But the parent has to know what I think of his child. Once it happened that I had to write less than a perfect note, he'll be much better next week. It's positive, but she said to me, no, I won't do it again, I'll be good. I said, really? Okay. I wrote a better note. I took the old note and I said to him, next week you're good, we're going to have a note burning ceremony. And every class had ashtrays, of course. For me, no. But the ashtray came in here. Give me the note. Kids love fire because there's power. So he burned the old note. Okay, so establish a relationship. When you come through the door, they know you. and they know that you are appreciative of them, you have a technical problem. Okay? That his technical problem is very big. Yeah? I know TWA, goes back a few years, there was two parents with a child, and TWA changed the parents to a different flight, and then they left the kid on it. So I said, it's no problem, just make sure to have someone on board to diaper him. And they changed his flight also. They were looking at a computer. It's only technical, just find someone to diaper the kid. And they, so people need to, when we talk about parents, which I think that's we're up to now, or not? Almost, yeah, go ahead.
No, I think we spoke a little bit about schools and the environment that we build for the children, for the Talmidim. We spoke about people that are out there that have composed entire ways of positive messaging around the school, and that although the responsibility falls to some large extent on the school, a big responsibility lies with parents to make connections with the school and to have a positive relationship. Just for one moment, talk about the actual mechanchim, a teacher in a classroom. So he's not the principal necessarily that's dealing with the complaints. Mm-hmm. He's in the classroom, he's got whatever, all the moving parts going on. Are mechanchim supposed to be really getting into the nitty-gritty, keeping an eye out on the social fabric of the class, or how much responsibility falls on individual mechanchim as opposed to just the school that's got a certain achrayus?
Again, if the school is locus parentis instead of parents, so the mechanech is in a much more individual way, locus parentis. And that child needs to feel safe in his classroom, needs to feel appreciated. He needs to feel the Rebbe likes me. I missed you yesterday, where were you? Or the child actually said something to you, or you found out that his little sister was sick. How's your sister? It's a nonverbal message. My Rebbe Zechaynu Levracha, the son of Rebbe Chanan, Shem Yinkom Damai, said, verbal messages you can block. I don't believe you that you love me. But how you refer to a child, how you even say his name, do you remember his name? That says something. And teachers need to rejoice when the child asks a good question. They need to rejoice when he gives a good answer. Now, Reb Nochem Patzovitz in the Mir, he used to do that in the Beis Medrash when he heard a question in Shir or outside of Shir. Oh, you probably need to ask like this. So that's in the Mir, in Yeshiva Gedola, and people who are the cream of the yeshiva world, they also needed, they also needed to feel encouraged and successful and respected by their Rebbe. So many more times, a child whose inner world has not yet been formed. It's like you want to teach a child how to speak. And he says, wawa. And the mother knows wawa is water. So you don't say water or wherever you come from. Yeah? Okay? Just keep using the word again till the kid picks it up. Don't shut him up. My Rebbe said that a child's like a new immigrant. He comes to a new country and starts looking around, starts behaving like everyone else, like British drivers in Israel. Okay? Well, they're not going to get anywhere. Okay? So, in England, they learned to be respectful and courteous when they drove. In Israel, it's different rules. Why is outside of purview? Yeah? Okay? But a Rebbe has a responsibility to develop a relationship with a child that the child feels that he's a someone. Because what the bully is doing is he's desiccating him. Now, that's too fancy a word today because English is a dying language. Yeah? He's shrinking the child. He's saying to the child, you're nothing, you're ugly, you're stupid, whatever it might be. Because in order to feel good, he has to put the other one down. If he's successful, so then that child cannot cope with the outside world. There's an outside world out there. There are a lot of germs. How are you going to say no to anything? It's if you have inside, we have the same amount of pressure inside of us as there is outside of us. Do we push back? The child has self-esteem, he could push back. We could talk about whether he should hit back or not. We can talk about that. I'm not going to paskin, yeah? But if you say to me I'm a nothing, I know I'm a something. That's the job of the Rabbi and of the parent. Now, as a principal, I would ask the teacher to send me kids who are doing well. They could say something to them and give them, and even write a note for them. Usually I was used as the club, yeah? Club has a few meanings in English, as the way of hitting the child and threatening the child and punishing the child. Send me kids that, okay? So that's why the Rebbe has a definite obligation if he wants to teach this kid Torah, okay? Even if you'll say his primary obligation is teaching information, which is not true. He had because I know of cases where kids get through school and once they're done, they won't open a book again. So is that a failure? They got A's all the time. But no, wait a minute. I'm building his future. Does he love Torah? We love the things that we're successful in. Who likes to play football in England or in Israel? Yeah, the guys who are good at it. So he has to feel successful. And if success is you got 10% of the share, that's terrific. It's the main thing is how hard did you work? And I build up the child's self-esteem. Sometimes it needs to be prepared beforehand. I had a student who didn't understand Yiddish. And they put him in my class because I speak English, which is like a really good shidduch, But he prepared the class in English beforehand. So from Chile, he went to Marova, and the first year was a washout. Learn the Gemara in Spanish. Now what does he have to say? So we're not here to talk about what to do with weak kids, but there's no such thing as a child who's not successful. I have to feel that school is my world. So I said, the teacher does that. The principal is more to help them carry that out. And he knows the big picture. And we do not give from year to year what the previous teacher thought of the kid. The principal has to know if the kid's an orphan or if there's a sick child at home, or the principal has to let him know, here's the big picture. I know of a case where there was a Masorah for 7 years that this kid needs tough handling. And the Rebbe, the 7th grade of Huffman Zatzal, said, no, let me make my own decision. And he saved the kid's life. So we do not hand over opinions of the kid. Is he brilliant or not? Okay, so that's a Rebbe's obligation to make that child feel, I have a place in this world. Because if he doesn't have a place in this world, then he's going to find another world that he will have place in, or he thinks he will. Okay?